Your top 10 rogue decks for post-double YCS weekend and October. Make sure you guys smash the living crap out of that Odeon button so you guys don't miss out more content. I cannot actually say that this is like a super tier 1 deck because variants took hold. Those literally said they won 15 out of their 16 dice rolls. And that's a crazy thing to hear. Now, obviously, any deck can perform well if you get the chance to open up in your element and perform very, very well. But yes, the Primite version of Odeon is a strong contender right now. If you are really looking at the meta and you're going, well, I don't think Odeon's going to be good. If they win the dice roll against you, you have problems. I've also seen that deck brick a lot from people playtesting the hands. I love opening up Driver and the Trumpeter. It just feels so good, man. Like, the bricks for building that house are some of the absolute worst that you can have. But I'm intrigued to see where this deck is going to kind of land in future innovations, to say the least. Risle. So Risle, in my opinion, still remains one of the best rogue challengers you can have, especially for how cheap things can be to make this deck. Also, you know, if you're playing it with like the Onomatomat stuff, which you kind of are forced to do at this point. I guess you can still play it with Mitsu. But if you're playing it with Mitsu, you obviously don't have the connection point to get to the, you know, Mitsurugi stuff, because you did lose King of the Pharaoh. So it does end up being a little bit more inconsistent, but at least with the Onomatomat stuff, you have this deck very solidly building up some crazy boards. Detonator is still a very good card, but it's a card that we have to worry less about at this point. And I think that's a really cool thing, actually. Because we have to deal with less of a card right now, you know, it's less problems that kind of come up. But if you do see a 3-4 mat Detonator with Eclipse Twins under it, you're probably still going to have some problems in the current era. Momento. Build the Megazord the deck. So this is, for this deck still being like the massive regurgitation combo pile that it is, players are finally starting to read the cards, and they're finally starting to figure out, hey, this is how you counterplay against Momento. And thankfully, now that players have taken enough time out of their day to finally start to give this deck a chance to go, hey, you know, this is how we counterplay this, I think things are working out very, very nicely. Momento still builds up one of the craziest boards that we've seen, but the deck feels very fragile in its current era. Maybe it's just from what I've been seeing, but it's still going to be a very strong contender for the YCS and the regional level. It's a lot of comboing and a lot of ignitions that you're gonna have to set through. So something to think about. Gem Knights, the build a board after I break my opponent's board with one board breaker, the deck, aka the OTK machine. You know, I think one of the coolest things I saw with Gem Knights recently was the idea that somebody said, hey, I'm sick of them making me go first because my deck does nothing. They decided in a whole 15-card canine package and was like, we're just going to start Mjolnir locking people if they make me go first. The counterplay to this. And I think that's one of the things that makes Gem Knight look like an inviting deck right now is if you're bringing in transformation side decks to overcome the boundaries that people are basically setting up here, that's a crazy thing. Like, that's genuinely some innovation. I think that would make Gem Knight into a scarier problem. So be very careful when you're approaching Gem Knight right now, because they might just have a trick up their sleeve for you. Purrely. I actually saw a Purrely deck top a regional. This actually made me kind of crap my pants in surprise because, you know, it just like Lunalights running around in the meta, they're using the big cat basically as this towers monster. Now, the rule right now is the cat can be a little bit scary because the cat can get bigger than the Lunalight monster. But the problem is Purrely's card pool is not exactly the best. You do have the ability to still stack up and, you know, get the multiple draws and some of that stuff, but it's got to work out. We also live in a format where there's a lot more hand traps. Droll and Lockbird can also ruin your day while choosing to play this deck. Also, I mean, you could supplement this with some other packages. I've also seen Yummy Purrely as a deck. That build definitely has more success than the pure variant at this point. Regenesis. So this one's actually been performing decently well on the regional side of things. And I think it's just strictly because people just don't respect Regenesis as a deck. The only time that you start to kind of question the life when playing against Regenesis is when all of a sudden, where did all of these monsters come from? Why are there so many big attack point monsters? Because usually when the first anchor comes down, which is usually going to be the Archfiend, once the first 2,500 anchors in, you know that you're going to be dealing with all of these extra monsters coming down. And that does kind of turn into a little bit of a problem. You got to think about it and just go, well, if I can't handle these problems, I just kind of lose the game. It is what it is, I feel like, but Regenesis has to not brick. It's the greatest tool against the deck is itself. I love those decks so much. Sky Striker. Sky Striker's our top 10 deck in Japan, according to so many OCG players, but you come to the English meta, and this deck just never really gets a chance to perform. Now, are the 4 missing extra deck cards all that important? I mean, consistency upgrades to Carmelia are important. The Link 1 does help override some of the madness and things we got going, but it's amazing to me that Sky Striker just kind of fumbles around a little bit, and it's one of those packages that you're just like, oh, we can't really do too much with this, but, maybe we can sort of try to build a board and go from there. It's OTK or bust for the TCG version. It's Raigekis, Droplets, Lightning Storms, Dark Holes. Whatever that you can stick in there, go second and absolutely try to decimate the opponent. That's the only real way you're getting this to work. And then we have White Forest. I still think White Forest, no matter what happens with your scenarios, ends up being one of the most important things that you're kind of forced to work with, because it's called what it is. White Forest, you combo up. If you get drolled, well, life sucks. Were you playing the Sales Band to call the droll? It kind of turns down to like the 800 IQ question. If they do get to make the Chaos Angel, both sisters, the snake that can kick into the spell and trap card zone, you're going to have problems. I will say, with how much of a board White Forest tends to make, it's very surprising to see that this deck just is not better than it actually is. But once again, we live in a format where you have potential hand traps that can shut a deck like this out. It happens. It tends to be, a lot of what this format is about, and also White Forest does take a little bit to set up. Time's not exactly their friend. Water. So Mermail still is kind of floating around in the back of people's minds. And I think this is going to be a thing for a while. Because when you look at Rogue, Mermail kind of had its fall from glory. You had this deck that would rip multiple cards from your opponent's hand. It would set up this stupid, crazy water board. And then, they started taking away resources from it during the ban list, which has definitely knocked the deck down a peg or two. Now, you're still going to have people picking this deck up because they love water combo. They love the idea of, we can go through these big synchro plays, we can do all the water stuff. We can Mullen Glacia. That's fine. This is the rogue side of things. We got to keep our expectations realistic. This is not a very strong rogue deck right now, but it's one that I think that players can get behind and actually just try to have a good time with. Consistency aside, it's okay. Then we have Cyber Dragon Canine. Oh boy. There are a lot of canine variants out here. I do want to say, obviously you have Sulfacord, you have Cyber Dragon, you have Pure Canine as well. There's going to be a lot of different canine things. I specifically mentioned Cyber Dragon here because, you can basically crack something out of the extra monster zone with a Cyber Dragon. Play Clockwork Knight, turn everything to a machine, do a full contact fuse. That's a lot of tools that you've got working at your disposal. And I think that's what makes Clockwork Knight into, a very, very strong-esque board breaker card. You know, I love being able to crack my opponent's field. Feels pretty good. But what do you guys think about all these cool rogue decks? Please leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think. I'll see your beautiful faces back here in a day, guys. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.